The title of today's message, and full disclosure, I gave this message here almost 5 years ago. And John had contacted me on email and asked me if I could come over and speak. This has been a few weeks ago, and I thought, I've got a pretty busy schedule, and I thought, I don't know if I'm going to have time to prepare a message. So I looked through my stack of notes that I've had, of messages I've given. I ran across this one, was like, I think this would be perfect, and especially for this time of year before Passover. And to me, it's really exciting. I hope you get value out of it. And if you remember any of it, if you have heard it before, then just bear with me. Maybe a little bit of refresher is not a bad thing. But the title of the sermon is the Psalms 23, verses 1 through 6. And it's, just a casual read. It's easy to miss how much is in there, but we're going to go through this. And I think it's pretty exciting. So the Lord is the shepherd of his people. And David wrote the 23rd Psalm, and he was very familiar with being a shepherd, with what being a shepherd was like, and he was very familiar with sheep. So if there's one thing that David knew, he knew about shepherds and about sheep. And in that chapter, David recognizes that he's a sheep. And I've got I think 10 characteristics of sheep here that we're going to go through. And sorry to tell you, but they're not all positive. We're sheep, and they're not all positive. A couple of these are positive, but it's good to be aware of them. Number one, sheep are not very smart. We tend to think sometimes we're pretty smart, and you've got, I get a little bit miffed about the IQ test and all of that. And my theory is, I think, okay, you take the IQ test or whatever normal ranges are from being really considered not very sharp to being like the smartest there is around. It's like, okay, here's the least smart, here's the most smart. Well, the reality is none of us are smart. We're all pretty stupid, actually. Only God is smart. And you got this range here from people that, and I think this is quite debatable, because God gives everybody different gifts. And some people that score way high on an IQ test, they can't find their way out of a paper bag. I mean, they might be smart in this or in book learning, but they can be pretty stupid in things that are just basic knowledge. So even that, I think, is highly in question, at least in my mind. But so here's our normal scale of human intelligence. Okay, well, anybody here ever been to Alaska? Sharon has, on a cruise. Well, in comparison, if here's the human range from being not very smart to smartest. Okay, God's way up in Alaska off this chart. I mean, he's way beyond Alaska. He's out in eternity. So if we get to thinking we're pretty smart, we're actually not. We can learn some things and we can become smarter, but my theory is that pretty much most everybody, and I know there's exceptions to this, but I think most everybody gets standard issue intelligence. And a big part of it is the want to. You can be the smartest person in the world. If you don't have the want to, it doesn't matter. You have to have the want to. Okay, so to begin with, sheep are not very smart. Number two, sheep have no sense of direction. And there's a book, I meant to bring it today, and I looked for it last night. I couldn't find it, and I forget who the author is, but this guy that wrote the book, it's about sheep, and it's considered to be the best book there is on the 23rd Psalm. And this guy grew up in South Africa as a shepherd, so he was a shepherd growing up, and then he still has, as an adult, he still has a sheep farm, I think, and he's a pastor of a church, as far as I know, when the book was written. But I couldn't find it last night. I think maybe I loaned it to a friend of mine who has since died of cancer about 1.5 years ago. But anyway, sheep have no sense of direction. All you have to do is look at the world and you can figure that out. You got all kinds of crazy ideas in the world, but here's our sense of direction right here. It's by a good shepherd. Another trait of sheep is, and I didn't know this until I read in his book, is sheep fall over on their back, they cannot get back up. They've got that heavy wool on them, and if they fall down, if they roll over on their back, they're kind of like a roach laying there on its back. Just flailing its legs. Another aspect of sheep is they're defenseless. A lot of animals, they've got horns or, like these big fangs, and they can, like a cougar or something. Sheep are defenseless. They can kick, but that's about all they've got. Another very important aspect of sheep is sheep are not intended to carry burdens. We're not intended to carry burdens either. Our Savior and our Shepherd, Jesus Christ, carries our burdens if we let him. Another ironic thing about sheep is sheep are dirty. Their skin emits this lanolin, this oil that protects the wool, but when they lay down, they get pieces of grass and dirt and sticks and all kinds of nasty insects and things like that in their wool, and they have no way to clean themselves, just like us. The only way we can truly be cleaned is by the blood of Jesus Christ, which we will be celebrating at Passover in a few days. So, we get dirty, we get messed up, and we can't, spiritually, and we can't fix that. Only God can fix it if we allow him to, and only God can clean us up. Another aspect of sheep is, and we're gonna read through the 23rd Psalm here in a few minutes, but the good shepherd leads the sheep to clear water, to good water. But the sheep, if they have a chance, they'll settle for less than the best. If they see some muddy water or contaminated water, they'll drink that if the shepherd doesn't lead them on to the clean water. Another aspect is sheep cannot care for themselves if they get wounded. If we get wounded spiritually, we need God's help and God's healing. Okay, I've got two positive aspects about sheep here. One is, Jesus Christ says, "My sheep hear my voice." And in this book, the author tells about you can have two different shepherds, unrelated. Just say one shepherd shows up at the clear water with his flock of sheep, and his sheep are drinking. And then another shepherd comes along with his flock of sheep, drinking out of the same water, and in the process, the sheep get intermingled. But when the shepherd is ready to leave, he calls to his sheep, and his sheep recognize his voice, and his sheep will leave with him, whereas the other sheep from the other shepherd will stay there. And we're the same way. It's as Christ said, "My sheep hear my voice." And I remember my wife and I experiencing that back in '95 when Worldwide split. And it was clear that, the voice that came to be there worldwide was not God's voice. And, that was easily detectable, but we heard God's voice and we followed his truth. Let's turn to John chapter 10, and we'll read verses 7 through 15. John 10, 7 through 15. John 10, starting out in verse 7. This is about Jesus, the Good Shepherd. Then Jesus said to them again, most assuredly, I say to you, I am the door. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. I am the door of the sheep. All who ever came to me before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. So let's talk about the door. In the past, I never knew what that meant. I'd read it like I don't know what it means that Christ is the door. Well, what it means is the shepherd, when it's time to bed down for the evening or whenever, the shepherd would lead the sheep to a sheepfold, which could, it might be a cave, and they go in the cave, or it might be an enclosure of walls, built out of stone or whatever, and then have the one way for the sheep to go in and to go out when the time came. Okay, the reason it says that Christ says, I am the door, is because what the good shepherd does, he gets the sheep in there where they're protected from predators, and then the shepherd lays in the door opening. So nothing can get in, no predators can get in there without going through the shepherd. And our good shepherd, he's there and he protects the sheep from the predators. Whereas a hireling, he would take all, he's just getting paid, he doesn't really care about the sheep, and he would take off running if a predator came up there. And because he was a hireling. And we probably all experienced that. I remember back, doesn't seem this long ago now, about 35 years ago, when the previous organization split, that I remember sitting there in the field house there at Big Sandy for a year and hearing all these sermons that were off base and I knew they weren't true. And I'd look around, I'm thinking, how many people are buying this stuff? And then there were ministers on the payroll that stayed that used to preach the exact opposite. And it became clear over time that a lot of those guys stayed for the paycheck, because if they didn't preach the apostasy, they would be fired and they'd lose their paycheck. Well, that's by definition, that's a hireling. And one thing I like about CGI is just one of the things I like about CGI, almost nobody's on the payroll. So they're not there to keep from losing the paycheck because they ain't getting one. And I think that can be a positive. Okay, continuing in verse 10. The thief does not come except to steal and to kill and to destroy. That's what Satan does. That's his objective. But Christ says, I have come that they may have life, and that they may have it more abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd gives his life for the sheep. That's pretty key here. He's not a hireling. Verse 12, but a hireling, he who is not the shepherd, one who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees. And the wolf catches the sheep and scatters them. The hireling flees because he is a hireling and does not care about the sheep. I am the good shepherd, and I know my sheep, and am known by my own. As the Father knows me, even so I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. So there is a good shepherd, and that good shepherd is Jesus Christ, who created us, gave up everything to come here and live a physical life, lived a perfect life, and then he gave that perfect life for me and for you. That's, how awesome it'll be when he returns. And, we all see all the politics of the day, and you got this group over here, this political group, at this political group, and everybody's fighting back and forth. How nice it will be when the King of Kings returns, just like the last song that we sang. And he will be the good king, because he's the good shepherd. And Satan will destroy us by any means he can. He doesn't care, by what means, if he can get us distracted by the physical life or by sin or whatever he can. He wants to distract. His main objective is he wants to distract us, and so he can destroy us. So let's turn to the 23rd Psalm. We'll start in verse 1. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, and that word want in Strong's Concordance is number 2637, means I shall not want or suffer. So if the Lord is our shepherd, we are so incredibly blessed to have a good shepherd, the good shepherd. The good shepherd he gives to the sheep and gives us incredible peace of mind. The good shepherd lives with the flock. He lives in you and he lives in me. He's everything to the flock. He's the guide, the protector, the physician. The good shepherd knows everything about the sheep. He understands what foods are best, so he knows where to lead us. He knows what will harm the sheep, when we should eat, when we should drink. And the good shepherd is expert at knowing the terrain, the best places for food and the best places for water. So as long as we, the sheep, trust and follow our good shepherd, we will always have our needs met just at the right time. Because the good shepherd gives his very best. He's not guessing at it, well, I hope this will be best, or maybe this will be, or, well, I got distracted and I realize now they had some needs and I wasn't there. No, our good shepherd is here with us constantly. He lives in us. I'll tell you a story or two if I have time. Okay, the first one, hang on a minute. It was pretty interesting to me and my late wife about God's goodness for us. Okay, Linda and I, back been 15 years ago or so, or a little over, we stepped up to the plate to do something good for another church organization, and it wasn't supposed to cost us any money. The expectation was it would take about six months, some of my time over the course of about 6 months. It wasn't supposed to cost us a penny. Well, before it was all said and done, it cost my late wife and I about $500,000, which was just horrible. There was nothing right about it. It was all wrong, but that's the way it turned out. And when I found out Linda was dealing with something, that was in fall of 2018. So when we got back from the feast, I took her to 22 different doctor visits, from Gladewater, where we lived, to Jacksonville, Texas, to Dallas, to Scottsdale, Arizona. And it was really hard on especially Linda, because we were about to lose everything that we'd worked our whole lives for. Because of, before that, we had our credit rating was impeccable. After that, I couldn't have borrowed money to buy a loaf of bread. It was shot. And so that was really hard on, especially on Linda. And she would cry every day for a year or two. We got to get all these phone calls, and again, nothing about it was right. It was all wrong. We tried to do the right thing, and we suffered for it, which sometimes that happened. That's okay, but the really hard thing is, for the main three doctors I took Linda to, including the neuropsychologist, 3 different visits, and it wasn't your typical 15-minute doctor visit. These were each 3-hour visits, and he was really good and thorough. But all 3 of those main doctors, including him, thought the reason my wife got frontotemporal dementia was because of all the stress from that. So God is good, and He's there for us. You know, we don't know all the details, and I guess we won't until the kingdom. But that was really a hard part. And one thing I've learned through it all is not everything that somebody that stands up here in the pulpit and preaches is gospel. Sometimes, I mean, over the years, most of all of you have been around long enough, probably, I'm sure, to know that some things that some ministers say are not inspired, and they're actually turn out pretty evil, like this circumstance. But on the bright side of that, I mean, to me, of course, losing my wife overshadows the rest of it, but I did what I could, and the ball's in God's court to sort that out. But on the bright side, okay, we had, in order to survive that ordeal, Linda and I built our dream home 29 years ago, and it would have been paid off, but I put a $350,000 mortgage on our house to survive that, and then with interest over a 10-year period, it was about $500,000. Okay, and our house went into foreclosure, and our daughter is an attorney. She's owned a law firm she started in another state 20 years ago. She was able to get the house out of foreclosure, and I had to wake up every day and make $200 every single day in order to make that payment on the debt that we put on the house because of what Linda and I had we hadn't volunteered to do that. What I volunteered to do was that I will do it to the degree my circumstances allow. And then it went way beyond that. And if I had just stopped, even though my circumstances no longer allowed it under that situation, I think it would have split the church. So we just hung in there. But to cut to the chase on this part of it, on the last afternoon of the last day of the month, every month this went on for a year or two, our house is about to go into foreclosure again on the last day of the month. And God would pull a rabbit out of the hat. And I'll tell you a couple examples. One is, there's this little Mexican restaurant in Gladewater that if I go somewhere to eat lunch, that's where it's likely to be because food's inexpensive, it's good, and service is good. So I had gone in there one day during this period of time, and it was a late lunch because I was having to work so hard because it was like 2:30 in the afternoon, and I'd always sit in the booth at the far back corner of the restaurant because I like having my back to the wall where I can see what's going on. And there's this guy that came in. He was up the front by the register, and I kept looking at him because I was trying to figure out if somebody I knew actually that used to attend CGI in Tyler and has since died. I was trying to figure out it was him. So then eventually he comes back there and sits down in the booth in front of me, and he's facing me. And I'd never met this guy before in my life. And he asked me, he looked up and said, what's good here? And I told him, well, I normally get a number 15. He said, well, I think I'll try that. So he orders it, and we're sitting there talking back and forth again. I never met this guy before in my life. And so eventually I said, you want to come over here and sit? And he said, sure. So he gets up and comes over there and sits across the booth from me. And he asked me, what do you do? I told him, well, I've got rental property and, some things. And I said, what do you do? He said, well, I'm a timber buyer. Do you have any timber you want to sell? And I said, well, remember, I'm needing money like really bad. And I said, I might. And a few days later, he comes to my office, writes me a check for $35,000 for some timber. We really kind of needed that. He was needing to, right at the end of the year, he was needing to, for tax purposes, needing to spend some money before the end of the year. We were kind of needing money like real bad, so we made a deal. And it turned out good. But that's just one example. Here's another example. We had this happen for 20 years and 2 years. I mean, like the last afternoon of the month, every month after month. And so we had some property on the loop there in Gladewater. It's late Friday afternoon. I took the mower over there, the riding mower, and I mowed the highway right away along the loop there in front of our property. And I took 2 for sale signs with me. And so I'm trying to hurry and get finished up. I'm pounding in the first for sale sign. And about that time, this nice, shiny, new black dually truck pulls over off the side of the road. And I'm thinking, yeah, wouldn't that be great? This guy's pulling up to buy my property. And again, it's getting to be crunch time because this was right before July. I was going to say July 4th. So I remember we went out in Southwest Texas to meet with our son and his wife out there. But anyway, he gets out of the truck, and I totally ignore the guy. I take my other side and I run down the loop about 100 to 150 yards, and I start pounding in my other sign, for sale sign. So he gets out of the truck and comes down there where I am now, and he says, hey, I'd like to talk to you about your property. And I said, okay. And he said, do you have a site plan of it? And I said, yeah, in the truck. And he said, well, I think I might want to buy it. So I've been buying and selling real estate for 50 years, I guess. I've never had that happen before. So, long story short, he comes to my house a few days later, writes me a check for $10,000. And we owner financed part of most of it, I guess, to him. But that's just another example. We had that happen over and over and over again. And I'm sure the message from God was just like the 23rd Psalm, I'm here for you. I know you tried to do the right thing and it was taken advantage of, but I'm your provider. And I would not take $1 billion for knowing how faithful God is to us. So our good shepherd knows exactly what we need, and he knows we need to be refreshed at times. He knows we need to lie in lush meadows or beside quiet streams. He also knows that sometimes we need to be held, and he does that. And sometimes he carries us, and he holds us. And I know when my wife was ill for nearly 2.5 years that I knew of, and especially toward the end, most of you are probably familiar with the poem Footprints in the Sand, and I think about that poem fairly often, but I realized consciously then that it's really hard. If any of you have ever been a caregiver, and especially when your mate's dying, it's really hard. But I realized consciously then that I was being carried by our good shepherd. He responds in the perfect way. He knows our needs, and he responds in the perfect way and in the perfect time. He knows when we feel like we can't go any further. And when we reach that point, he always has the perfect remedy. And his remedy may be through his word. It may be advice or love from other people, or maybe through our circumstances. But he's a good shepherd, and he knows just what we need. and when we need it. One thing I want to mention too is in that book, I don't have it in my notes here, and it's really important that we stay with the Good Shepherd. The shepherd doesn't want the sheep wandering off, because it's the sheep that wander off that get attacked by the predators and devoured. And he told about in this book, and this really kind of breaks your heart, but I think if a sheep wandered off, the Good Shepherd leaves the 99 and goes after the one that's wandered off. That there were times when if this lamb repeatedly did that, and this is the heartbreaking part, that sometimes the shepherd would break the lamb's leg so he couldn't wander off, and he would carry him just like Jesus Christ carries us. And that would help build the bond together. And then sometimes the lamb would be standing there with the shepherd, and he would lean up against the shepherd. Most of you probably know what that feeling's like if you got a pet, a cat. I've got a big dog, that's not, of course, not allowed to come in the house, a Great Pyrenees. Then I have two cats, and I let the little girl cat, she's dainty. If it's cold or rainy, she gets scared outside, so I let her inside sometimes. And you know what a warm feeling it is, whether it's your small child that comes up and lays its head on your lap, or a dog or a cat that just wants to touch you. Say you're on the couch and it just wants to get up against you and touch you. That's the way it is with us and Jesus Christ, our Good Shepherd. Let's turn to Psalms chapter 34. Well, I'm just going to refer to it here. But it says, the Lord is near to those who have a broken heart, and saves such as have a contrite spirit. Anybody here ever had a broken heart? I have. And it's really heartwarming knowing that he's near to us, especially when we have a broken heart. He restores our soul, our mind, or our body. So if we're going through something, let's ask God to restore us, and then be prepared for how he responds and what he does next. Okay, let's read verse 4 in Psalms 23. It says, Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. None of us want to go through the valley of the shadow of death. But there's a few things to glean from this. One is, it doesn't say through the valley of death. It says through the shadow of the valley of death. It's a shadow, and shadows cannot hurt you. And another important thing to remember is, obviously, if you think about it, not very much, there cannot be a shadow if there's not a light. And the light is Jesus Christ. It says, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. As a child of God, we are never alone. Okay, now let's turn to John chapter 8, and we'll read verse 12. John chapter 8, verse 12. Verse 12, Then Jesus spoke to them again, saying, I am the light. Again, you've got to have a shadow, you've got to have a light. Jesus says, I am the light of the world. He who follows me shall not walk in darkness, but have the light of life. The Good Shepherd is with us at all times. And this is really encouraging, but you can look it up, but Our good shepherd goes before us. He doesn't just say, well, looks like didn't really plan this trip out good. Looks like you're going to go through the shadow of the valley of death. Then gives a shove off and say, good luck. No, he doesn't do that. Our good shepherd, he goes before us. He doesn't just push us into circumstances, but he leads the way. And at the same time, he walks beside us. And at the same time, he's our rear guard. He walks behind us. He protects us on every side, all the way around. His eyes are constantly on us. He comforts you with his strong presence and in your times of sorrow and your times of grief. I know because I've especially been living that the last 5 years. It's been 5 years since my dear sweet wife died. And Sharon knows too, because it's been 4 years since her husband Ken died. And I've met numerous other people in the last 5 years that have lost their mate. And one common thing that we've all experienced is when we're going through that grief, and you never get over it. I know because I've lived it, and I've talked to a lot of people, and I've read books on it and watched videos. But somebody told me here a few weeks ago that, yeah, it takes a while to get over losing your mate. No, you never get over losing your mate. It's always there. It's kind of like if you have a rock in your shoe and it hurts every step you take, and then you get a sore where that rock was, and then eventually maybe it heals over and it's callous, but you're still totally aware. It never goes away. But God comforts us. And it's when we're going through our deepest, darkest hour that God is the closest to us, especially in our times of grief and sorrow. I'm trying to read my crumpled notes on these side notes on Post-it notes. They're pretty crumpled up. I think I've basically already said that, but and here's a very important point. Okay, if there's the valley of the shadow of death up ahead of us, what do we all want? We all want to go around that. We want to take a detour and go around it. But our shepherd knows what we need, and he knows that sometimes we need to go through that valley of the shadow of death, because in order to get us where he wants us to be, we have to go through that, instead of him just diverting and leading us around it. That's becomes a part of our character and a part of our faith in him. But at those times when we go through the valley of the shadow of death, again, it's just a shadow. And I'm not denying that people die. I know, because my wife died and Ken's husband, or Sharon's husband Ken, died. So it does happen. But God is the life giver, and he didn't create any of us to live forever in this life. So we all die. We will all die. We don't get out of this deal alive. But God is the life giver, and he will give that life again. But during those difficult times, he walks closely with us, with his arm around us, or carrying us, and letting us know how much he loves us. It's during these times that we experience his love and compassion on a deeper level than you ever have experienced before. So we never have to fear evil. And I know toward the end for my wife, I could feel, I don't know if any of you have experienced this before. I'm pretty sure you have, and I would like hearing about it. But as Linda came to the end, I could feel the presence of God the Father and Jesus Christ. And that's a pretty special feeling. So we never have to fear evil. There's nothing that you will ever face that intimidates our good shepherd. He's seen it all, and he has defeated it all already. He's defeated every form of wickedness. So we need to place our trust in our good shepherd, because he will protect us. He will give us the ability, the strength to get through. Let's read verse 5. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. I'll share an example real quick here. 25 years ago, we did, my construction company, we did major construction on apartment complexes and renovations. 25 years ago, we did a 100-unit HUD rehab over here in Marshall. It was a bad place to be. There had been people literally killed in every building there. I couldn't, when we got deliveries, I couldn't get, a lot of times I couldn't get the delivery trucks, like a load of lumber, to come on. They'd pull up out front, they'd see where it was, they'd be like, I'm not going in there. So I'd have to coax them to come in and dump the load. And it was, we did $1 million worth of improvements before I ever got the city inspection department to come out there. The police wouldn't come out, city inspection wouldn't come out, fire department wouldn't come out, because it was a bad place to be. So anyway, we were doing this job, and for some reason the manager hated my guts. I didn't know at the time why that was, but she would do everything she could to defeat us. I had about 25 guys working for me there. And one day I was having a meeting with my main guys in my office trailer, and the only reason I took the job, agreed to do that job, was they had 24-hour round-the-clock armed security there. So we set up our office trailer and the other trailers and shipping containers right there by the security shack where you turn in the property, and put a 6-foot chain link fence around it. So anyway, I'm having a meeting one morning with my main guys. 2 security guards come in and tell me that the manager sent them over there to escort me down to the leasing office. So I go down there with them, which was pretty strange. So I like these guys, but I thought this is pretty bizarre. So I go down there with them, and the manager's boss was there from out of town. And she just kind of raked me over the coals and was lying to her boss. And so I thought, okay, that's enough. So I wrote her a letter. I told her, basically, just because I'm kind to you, don't think I work for you, because I do not work for you. I'm working for HUD. Leave us alone. Let us get this job done. And then I sent that letter to her. Then I sent copies of it to HUD and to some others. So that caused a big meeting there. They sent several HUD officials down from Fort Worth to have a meeting there in the leasing office. I was there. My business manager was there. A couple other friends of mine. So the verse 5 says, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over." So when we had the meeting, these HUD officials from Fort Worth spent 45 minutes telling this woman manager every way possible, shut up, leave this man alone, let him get this job done. And it's like, it was beautiful. That's exactly what he did. He prepared a table for me in the presence of my enemies. And then when the job was over, we came out really good on it. It was a lot of hard work, and it was dangerous work, not a good place to be. But God considerably blessed my wife and I through that, and other people, and it was a real blessing. So he does set us a table before our enemies, and he makes sure that our cup runs over. Verse 6, "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life." our loving Father and elder brother certainly do have our best interest at heart. He knows everything about us. He knows how many hairs we have on our head. He knows our every thought. He knows everything. And he loves us, so why would he not make sure that he does the best for us? And, if I have an issue that I would like solved, I have my own plan and how I would think maybe it's best to solve it. And I have my own timetable, but as it turns out, thankfully, God does not work on our timetable. And his plan is not always our plan. One thing I've learned in life is God's plan is always better. Even when it's painful for us sometimes, his plan is always better. And his timetable is always better because he does things at just the perfect time. He doesn't do shoddy workmanship. So we have an awesome shepherd. If we only walk with him, I picture with my little hand reaching up into his big warm hand and strong hand, whatever comes along, I don't care. I'm sure I've told here before about hiking Pinnacle Peak about 50 pounds ago. It was when one of my grandsons was born, and he's 17. So, but in Pinnacle Peak, there were pumas, which are also the same thing as cougars or mountain lions in the park, and there are rattlesnakes and different things, but you'd see signs that say stay on the trail. And every once in a while, fairly often, I'd see this big strong dad with his little son or little daughter about that tall, and the kids are hiking with their dad, and the kids keep their little hand reached up into their big strong dad's hand. That's the way I picture my relationship with God. If I just keep my little hand up in his, I don't care if there's a rattlesnake there, which I stepped over one of those one time hiking there, or I don't care if it's a rattlesnake or a puma or what it is. As long as we're walking with God, he's got it. So that's our concern, should be to make sure that we're walking with God. So in conclusion, what a great comfort it is to know that our Lord provides our every need. And he'll give us rest when we're weary. He drives away our fears. He will lead us down the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. But he wants his name protected. He doesn't want us to smudge and smear his name. He will guide us and protect us. He does not withhold anything good from us as long as we follow our Lord. The Good Shepherd provides our every need and protects us. John chapter 10, verse 27 and 28 says, "My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me." So, especially this time of year before Passover, we need to ask ourselves, who are we following? Are we following the Good Shepherd that has only our best interest at heart? Or are we getting distracted by Satan, by the false shepherd? So again, John chapter 10, verse 27 and then 28, "My sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. And I give them eternal life, they shall never perish, neither shall anyone snatch them out of my hand." So, and I'm anxious to pick up one of these sheets that John mentioned about reviewing ourselves for Passover. I'm anxious to pick one of those up and study through it, but let's all make sure that we examine ourselves before Passover and take of Passover worthily.